Hi, this is Mike Rother with the Genesis Ag Podcast. We are joined today by Josh Davis. Josh Davis is the Vice President of Genesis Ag. He is the son of Philip Davis. Josh has been around agriculture like most of us since he could walk, or maybe even before then. Josh, we're glad to have you here. We're excited to talk with you today. And I think most of the people listening today would be excited to learn a little bit about the Davis farm. Can you tell us a little bit about where you guys are, what you guys do, and all of that kind of stuff? Just give everybody a quick rundown.
Sure. So our farm is located in Western North Carolina, about 20 to 25 miles from Asheville. We're east of Asheville in McDowell County. We farm about 320 acres, primarily corn and soybeans. We test the waters in a couple other markets, and we do have an overboard family garden that my dad ventures off into. So we do a little bit of everything here, a lot of test plots in the garden as well. So people typically think that's south, so we get a lot more heat. We don't plant till the end of April, 1st of May, because we'll still get a frost that will do a pretty good number on a crop in that time frame as well. Even we had a frost around May 20th this year, so that always promotes a challenge.
Got to get it in early if you're going to get it in twice, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So can you describe some of the topography that you guys deal with? I know you guys, in my mind, are kind of rolly, kind of well-drained, let's say.
Yeah, a lot of what we farm here, we farm about 320 acres end to end, and we've got about 60 fields that we farm in, so it's not your typical farm that you deal with. We have a lot of turn rows and not a lot of straight rows, so that's a lot of creek bottom. Creeks divide a lot of fields. One landowner may have a 20-acre piece that we rent from them that may be 6 or 7 fields, and a lot of people say, well, why do you farm that? And we just have to accumulate acres. It's relatively high producing ground, but it's just so chopped up by small creeks that's what we have to deal with here.
And what kind of soil are you guys working with there, Josh? Is it rocky? Is it sandy? Is it?
Our what we'll call a creek bottom or a river bottom is a lot of sandier soil, like you said, well drained. Typically don't have the drought issues on those if we get into a drought situation in the summer. But then some of our upground, which would be higher elevation, is a lot of really hard red clay. And then that's where the opposite challenges come in. Get a lot of muddy feet if you get out there at the wrong time. So we may have a field that we could spray half of it one day and then have to come back and spray the other half the other day, just a difference in soil types.
That's crazy. So I guess in my mind, when I say the phrase well drained, I'm thinking just topography in general. I had a real estate guy describe some rolly ground as that one time. With all the slopes, he was trying to promote it as never having to worry about tile or anything like that. And of course, the joke is, I don't even know what tile is until 10 years ago. So I just picture your ground being rolly, kind of Appalachian mountainy.
Yeah, most of it's rolly. Water's typically not a problem until this year with the rainfall that we've had. We've got several fields that I wish we had tile in.
Okay.
So.
And water's not generally an issue, you said. Is that, I mean, your rains normally come weekly or? Yeah,
kind of where we're at, a storm cell, a lot of what we get this time of year is thunderstorms. It will back up against the mountains. That's how the terminology that people say here, and just kind of sit there, and you'll accumulate a decent amount of rainfall.
And do you guys generally have like spans of weeks where you can go without rain in the summer, or do you generally get a little something every so often? Or I know there's no such thing as
get some. Yeah, most of the time we'll get enough rainfall to sustain a crop. But the last 3 years, once July 1st hits, we have not had any rain. I recall 3 or 4 years ago that once we put the crop in the ground, we only had about 1.5 inches of total rainfall on our crop. So that would seem to be a challenge in most cases, but it doesn't affect us how it affects, what some people would say, that would be a lost crop in some places. But where we're heavy cover crop, we're planting into a cover crop, basically sod planting. We conserve a lot more moisture. Our soil tilt is a lot better, so our roots get a lot deeper. So we have tried to create the advantages to where little rainfall, extreme heat doesn't promote the challenges that we see in other places. Now, those are a lot. When I say that, we've picked up some different fields, kind of traded some fields in and out that some land may have been sold, whatever the condition may be, that we've picked up new ground that's only been farmed a couple years. And that's your typical farm ground, so to speak, throughout the U.S. If we go 2 weeks without a rainfall, you can tell it in these fields because the soil condition is that much different.
So if you had to put a number on the water holding capacity between the stuff you guys have been farming for a long time versus a new field that you pick up, what would you say the water holding capacity difference would be per foot?
That's a good question. I've never really tested that because our terrain is so different to actually know what our water holding capacity would be. I would say that it would be 200 to 300% better based on what the crop visually looks like in the ground that we own or we farm for several years versus the newer ground that we farm.
So you guys can take the new ground that you'd pick up. How long would it take for it to get more like the stuff that you farmed for a long time? Could you get that process done in a year or 5 years, 10 years?
Depending on condition, soil type, it could take anywhere from 3 to 5 years to start really seeing the changes start taking place. You can see small incremental things year to year, but as far as getting that field somewhere that I'm confident that I could go out and grow X number of bushels of corn, X number of bushels of soybeans would probably be a 3 to 5 year span.
And can you walk us through something like that? If you picked up a field today that was moldboard plowed, farmed flat, what's the first thing you would do? And just walk us through the whole process.
Well, in our region, we typically struggle having too low a pH soil. Just the old adage was you put lime on it, but what we would do would be take a soil test and actually say, okay, what do we need to put out there? Typically, potassium solubility is a problem whenever we get into the lower pHs. So we may put a blend out there that may have a ton of lime and maybe 200 to 400 pounds of potassium sulfate.
And then you do that in the early spring or fall whenever you pick it up, and then
typically we try to get that on in the fall because we'll have a cover crop growing, let the soil start metabolizing that, because it does take quite a bit of time for sulfur to move through the soil, really about 4 to 6 months to even start moving inches as far as soil applied sulfur.
Okay, so you get that blend of fertility out there and the amendments out there, and then you plant a cover crop, you said. Do you have a favorite cover crop blend or species that you like?
Typically, what we'll do is we'll use some oats, looking at phosphorus solubility. Oats are really great for solubilizing phosphorus, keeping zinc available. We do apply copper quite a bit now because those are key in phosphorus solubility. But we'll add Austrian winter peas, hairy vetch, some daikon radish, a little bit of rye. We'll get about a 6 to 10 weight mix, typically closer to 6 as far as an even spread. And we'll put the same mix on every acre, regardless if it's going into corn or soybeans the next year.
Okay, so that's just a blanket thing. No matter what we're going to do, this is what we do. This is our first step.
Yeah.
So then you mentioned you like to do sod farming or sod planting, no-tilling stuff in there. So you're going to plant your corn or your soybeans, no real preference there, whatever the rotation dictates, into that cover crop. And then what do you do? What's the next things that you guys do there? Or, I mean, I'm talking like at planting, do you run any fertility 2x2 in furrow? Do you run any magic stuff? Things of that nature.
So what we did this year, and we're constantly changing, constantly evolving, and the guys that have been with us for a while see that with our products and programs, and we always tinker on our farm before we start throwing out things as far as what our recommendations would be. But we typically, our cover crop will be knee to waist high whenever we like to go in and plant, when it's fit for us to plant, around the end of April, 1st of May, and we'll plant into that cover crop green. Corn, we'll put some goodies in furrow, typically some biologicals and micronutrients. We don't try to target any NP and K in our pop-up because we're trying to get the plant started off where micronutrients aren't deficient in it. And we're just putting a taste out there. We figured out that putting the NPK in there is not really a benefit. It's a feel good. It's a cosmetic for what we have seen. We used to use a lot of 318-18 in furrow, but we've kind of backed off of that maybe 5 years ago or so, 5 or 6 years ago, whenever we saw what the biologicals could do for us as far as getting the plant up, getting the plant healthy, and getting it kicking, and putting things like zinc, manganese, cobalt, selenium, molybdenum, putting those in there at small doses in furrow with some humic acid and some biological energy.
One thing you mentioned, and I wrote it down so I didn't forget, you mentioned that copper is key to phosphorus solubility, and you also mentioned another nutrient, but I'm going to have to go back and listen to catch which one that is. Can you explain to me? And zinc. Okay.
Yep.
Can you explain to me how one nutrient can affect another? When I think of nutrients, I think of them as being inert, being they're not actively doing anything. So how can one thing that's just sitting there, just completely inert, have an effect on another?
Well, you look at cations and anions, positively and negatively charged elements, and the plant takes nutrients up, what I'll call in tandem. And some people have heard me talk about tandem elements, where basically it takes two of those for the plant to uptake one. It's like we struggle with, as far as our company recommendations, with boron based on a tissue sample. But what people are looking at is they're out there applying pounds and pounds and pounds of boron, and they don't really change anything on their soil test or on their tissue or sap sample. We prefer sap because there are some irregularities looking at tissue samples, but looking at those, people aren't looking at what it takes to get boron into the plant. So the thing that goes with boron would be silica. So nobody's really looking at silica. Sure, it's the fourth most abundant element in our Earth's crust, but it's not available to the plant. So using something like a soluble silica source that is available to the plant will actually elevate the levels of boron in the plant subsequently based on what the plant uptakes. So you can pour all the boron you want to pour out there and not get it into the plant. Just like phosphorus, if you don't have adequate zinc and adequate copper out there, it becomes a challenge to get phosphorus into the plant. So that's why a lot of times we'll use a sea mineral or a humic acid tandem with these elements to basically create a plant food that is giving the plant what it needs to uptake its primary nutrients. Your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, sulfur, and calcium are your macronutrients. You have to apply the proper micronutrients to get those levels elevated in the plant.
That's not something that a guy comes across in 101 of how to farm. How did you guys come across all that information? Can you?
We've met a lot of people along the way in our journey as far as Genesis Ag and even our farm here. And he's really taken a lot of information, and I'm glad he's been able to remember this, and he's brought that to you and I, Mike. He's had a lot of knowledge that's came here, and we've met some really great people along the way that's taught us a lot. Several consultants that are off the ball consultants. It's not conventional wisdom that you go off of. That's one thing that I think you and I can both say. The things that we've learned as long as we've known each other have came from people that aren't your university scientists or teachers or anything. It's the off the wall people that nobody really want to listen to because it's that much different than mainstream agriculture. And those are the people that I think you and I both learn the most from, because it opens up another realm of thinking.
Well, it's another path to walk down, and they may not be right, they may not be wrong, but one thing about it, the path that everyone's on currently is well trodden enough that we're not going to learn anything new by doing the same thing everyone else is doing.
Yeah, that's right.
So you guys, you said you've had lots of challenges with water. You've got some corn out there. You've got some soybeans out there. Do you guys grow any sort of goofball crops, anything that's maybe unique to your area that most people aren't familiar with? Any muckets, anything like that?
We are dabbing in some things to diversify our farm. The thing that is challenging is the markets that we have to sell to. We were going to take a pretty large shot in the dark this year growing some hemp, but all of our ability to possibly buy everything that we needed or sell everything that we needed, that outlet kind of dissolved to a point with us. So we still have an opportunity to set some out to try to learn to see if it could be a alternative source of income for us. So there may be some hemp plants on our farm by the end of July, but that's a path we've not traveled down to this point. Mm-hmm. We do grow a lot of vegetables. A lot of that's to self-sustain the family. We have sold vegetables in the past, and that may be a future market that we go down, but you're looking at the manpower behind our farming operation right here. So it's hard for me to go out and pick 10,000 ears of sweet corn in a day, or pick up 2 tons of potatoes to take to the local market and sell, because I have little hands.
So you guys, I know in the past, have had livestock. Do you guys currently have any livestock on the farm?
We do not have any livestock currently. Just with our travel schedule and everything, it's hard to have anything. Everybody says, "Do you have a dog?" And I'm like, "Well, how do you have a dog when you drive 70,000 miles a year and stay in hotels half the year, trying to travel across the country?" So it's a challenge. So,
because that is one thing, that's one of your primary duties in Genesis Ag, is to go out and beat the drum on the road for everybody else and spread the message. What's your, how long have you spent on the road, and what's your major territory? Where all have you been? Where do you like to go? Where do you not like to go other than Colorado?
My typical region that I work in is Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, and parts of Illinois. I do have customers all across the country, but primarily that's kind of my focal point, setting there. We've got some guys in the northeastern part of the U.S. We've got a guy here local to us here in North Carolina that facilitates Virginia, in North Carolina and South Carolina. We've got a guy that works out of our city of Kansas City, facilitates several states there, a guy in Iowa, and my dad and I kind of rogue it. I know I've got a little more specific territory than he does, but we kind of rogue it and go everywhere. So may take a road trip occasionally. I've been to your farm, been as far west as Utah and Idaho and farm ground. Been into Canada, been in the southern tip of Texas. So I've kind of been all across the U.S. looking at farms. My favorite place to go as far as terrain would probably be around the Rockies, a little bit west of you, even out into Idaho, Utah. That's really, really pretty country, I guess, because I'm not living out there. So people may come here and say the same thing I'm saying about there, but yeah.
Well, we've got about, we're closing in on the end of this episode, Josh. If somebody wanted to get a hold of Genesis Ag and have Josh Davis come out and visit their farm, how available are you?
This year, we've put a few traveling restrictions on ourselves because of the COVID-19. So seeing me this year could be a challenge, but we are open to doing anything in the future. My dad and I, either one, traveling to a farm to visit, really just contacting the office or visiting the website. Send us your information, try a couple products, say I'd like a farm visit, and we can go from there.
Well, fantastic. Josh, we appreciate your time, and we will be speaking to you in the future.